when Rafe was talking about different methods of addressing academic members of staff, I was reminded of the disparity between being addressed by my MSc oil and gas students. Dearest, humblest salutations to you on this fine day, Professor Price, versus hi Graham from the UK students. So it's every day I get that and I find it interesting. Can I apologise to those of you who've seen this presentation before, which is a goodly number of you. I have changed it a little bit. Mostly what I want to do is talk to you about the oil project itself, rather than focusing on the subsequent research that I did as a result of the oil project. The key aim, if I can, is to encourage you, if you haven't already in your departments, to think about doing something like this, because the approach that I've taken and actually stuck with is a very simplistic, easy introduction to oil projects. So, online international learning, I don't need to tell you what that is because you've seen several presentations of that already. The university approach, which I agree with, rather than what I've seen at perhaps the State University of New York, is little and widespread, rather than in-depth, detailed, but voluntary. And I think the university approach have got it right. I think if you make this mandatory, you've got to do it in such a way that it's accessible. And I think we're going about it the right way. One of our students has a link. He's German. Don't ask me how this came about. He's a German national with links to a university in the Netherlands studying in the UK. I haven't even asked the question how that came about, but it has. And all these students in the Sassuan University in the Netherlands are studying environmental management. We struggled in disaster management to find like-minded or similar courses. There is no disaster management at university in Germany, for instance. It's all something closely related. So we split into 8 groups of around 4 or 5 each, and we asked them to Skype each other and to document some of their conversations on Facebook or LinkedIn. That's all we did. Really, really simple stuff. Nothing in terms of any structure that they needed to particularly follow. We gave them a suggested structure, but nothing mandatory or prescriptive. And they were reflecting on this in their portfolio. There's no staff presence at these meetings, largely because it's a bit of a waste of staff time to just sit there like a lurking presence in a room while the students talk to each other. And also it's essentially self-regulating. If you've got one body of students that have to meet another body of students, one is going to dob the other in if they don't turn up. So it's self-regulating, we've got no problem there. This breaks all my rules on word density in a slide, but it's ultimately, that's the assignment that we set them. And the key thing to home in on is reflecting on their own cultural background versus the cultural background of these students in the Netherlands. I'm going to skip through a lot of this because I'm very conscious of time, given my predecessors. So what worked well in this project? It was level 1. These students came in, and in induction week I was able to say to them, you will be doing an oil project in a few weeks' time with students from the Netherlands. They didn't know any different. When I tell the current crop of 3rd years what I'm asking the 1st years to do now and what I asked last year's 1st years to do, they look at me in astonishment as if to say, I can't believe this. I would never do this if you asked me to do it. This is crazy. In the same way that there was a little bit once Alison had helped me yesterday with some short story coursework, outcry of, why have we got a short story in final year? This is crazy, we've never had this before, because that's what 3rd years are like. They become accustomed to having things in a particular way. If I gave them a short story in 1st year, there'd be no questions asked.
Well,
I have faith in my students, really. I honestly think, given how well last year's 1st years and this year's 1st years have taken to this, there's no problems with innovative assessment. Level 1 are your guinea pigs. They do have more knowledge of tech than we do. When I was talking to them about this, the idea of Skyping and using social media, no problem. Absolutely no problem. The mature students, 1 or 2 issues. But generally speaking, the kind of classic level 1 students, 18, 19, straight in, no problem. So I gave them a structured conversation with some themes to explore, which they followed. And they ended up actually just talking about their courses and student life, which is both an advantage and a disadvantage, but ultimately it fulfilled the Year 1 oil aims because they had a conversation about cultural differences with someone from another culture. So the portfolio assessment, which I won't go into in too much detail, but I felt it was vague and lacking structure. They bored me to tears when I was marking them, I won't lie. We met the students from Sassuan University. It was interesting. We had a conversation. It was fine.
That's fine. I just understood.
But I found that if I was bored reading it, they were almost certainly bored writing it. So I decided to make some changes based on that. And they did just end up chatting about their courses and student life, which if you want to be prescriptive, you could view as a disadvantage. Language was a slight issue because although the standard of spoken English in the Netherlands is very, very high, generally compared with perhaps other European countries, there were still one or two issues. And it did feel quite informal, just saying to them, go and Skype some students in the Netherlands. And as well, because it was light touch, it wasn't focused on a specific study theme beyond intercultural differences and discussing their courses. So it wasn't like I set them a specific task related to disaster management. I'm going to skip through this. Basically, I asked all of them, all 35 of them, to fill out a questionnaire, of which 15 did, and here are some of their answers. As a first year student, it's an easy introduction to university academic writing. This is about the portfolio. It was a good opportunity to express opinions. I don't know how else it could be done. I asked them this at the start. I gave them an opportunity to write qualitative responses about what they thought. I don't think anything else would work as well as a portfolio. I prefer to answer the question that was just about my experience. It was constrained in what we could write about. Really, a reflective portfolio was constrained? Gosh, you should see some essays. And what was the other one? Sorry. Yes, there wasn't any intensive discussion as there was a high barriers to language difficulties, though it's not clear on whose side that is. Yeah, so there's some of the things they had to say. Broadly speaking, what worked well? This is very interesting because the comments don't reflect the statistical response. The comments are generally positive. Yet, almost half said that they didn't think it was a valuable international experience. But, would you want more opportunities? 3/4, I mean, we've got a very narrow sample here of 15 students, said that they would. And I am pretty much running out of time. I feel an understanding of different perspectives is important to my academic and professional development. So they kind of agree with the principle of OIL. So basically, I think I've got a winning audience each year, but I just have to tweak the assessment. That was essentially my conclusion. Let me just skip to... These are all the different assignment choices I gave them: webinars, working in a shared space online, an individual essay, and intercultural competency. 2/3 of them want to do this, an essay instead. Do you want to be assessed at all? No, they do actually want to be assessed on the oral project, so that's good news. So, in conclusion, because I'm very conscious of time, there were slightly confusing messages about the oral project when I interviewed them about it. They were happy to be involved, but less happy with the structure and methods. The students they were more positive about the portfolio than I expected, because I thought they'd just say it was boring. And for this year at least, they like essays. So what have I learned? What am I doing differently right now? Because I initiated this over a year ago, and I'm in the middle of doing the same thing again. They need to keep logs immediately after the meeting. Having them just meet up, Skype, and talk, and then go away is a problem, because they do this in November and they write it up, probably, at 7 o'clock on January the 5th, because it's due in on the 6th. So they need to keep logs immediately after that. I want to be able to access it at any time. Using Google Docs, particularly with our overseas partner, is invaluable. It's so easy. You would not believe how easy it is to use Google Docs, how easy it is to share. So when you're using groups on a spreadsheet to coordinate, you must use Google Docs. And ultimately, it's not hugely broken. This principle of meeting with Skyping students in the Netherlands, discussing cultural differences, and discussing attitudes to courses, it's not broken. It's not hugely complicated, it's not massively innovative, doesn't, I'm quite pleased to say, involve a huge amount of work from me, so I'm not going to make wholesale changes, but what I will be doing is going through this process again with them in January to give them the same questions and find out what they thought, and continue to make adjustments until I've got something that I feel is about right. I'm sorry that that's so hurried, and I hope it's relatively clear what we did. There's probably time for a question, I would hope.
This is excellent. We can ask a question for Graham if we leave them the food. So, question for Graham. If the people outside want our food, but they give us an extra minute here. So, what question for Graham? Yes?
Yeah. So what I've been hearing a lot is in terms of the global graduate competencies. There was the collaboration, communication, drive and resilience, embracing multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
So there's been a very strong emphasis on communication and just talking with people. What do you think the scope is to actually do collaborative work with students across universities?
I think, from my point of view, that's something I would look to in the future, but I think you have to establish a relationship first. I think you have to have an academic contact who you have some sort of relationship with, because I Skype with Gerald as well. We've Skyped about 5 or 6 times, and each time we do it, we find out new things about the way each other's courses work, the way we assess. And I think there is scope for that, but my personal view is this thing first.
Like first the relationships building and
then make it more complicated. And I think if you're going wholesale, the complicated assignment structure, webinars, I think you're asking for trouble. I think this is the best approach. So we're sort of fine-tuning over a period of time. He's on board, he's doing similar things with his students in the Netherlands. So, yeah.